There are moments when loyalty transcends human understanding. This is the story of Max, a chocolate Labrador who taught us the true meaning of unconditional love. Max wasn't an ordinary dog. For 9 years, he was the inseparable companion of Thomas, a marathon runner who, after an accident, had lost hope of ever running again. Thomas Reed had been one of the best marathon runners on the East Coast. Running was his life, his purpose, his identity. Since childhood, he had found freedom in the rhythm of his feet hitting the pavement. By 30, he had won 17 major marathons and was training for the Olympic trials when fate intervened. That fateful winter morning started like any other. Thomas was on his regular training route, the one he had run hundreds of times before. The road was slick with black ice, invisible until it was too late. The SUV that hit him couldn't stop in time. The accident destroyed more than his right knee. It destroyed his spirit. The impact shattered his patella, tore 3 ligaments, and compressed his spine. The prognosis was grim from the start. 3 surgeries later, the doctors were clear. Thomas would never compete again. He could regain basic mobility with extensive therapy, but the dream of marathons was over. His knee would never withstand that kind of pressure again. "You need to accept your new reality," his specialist said with clinical detachment. Many people live fulfilling lives without running marathons. But for Thomas, running wasn't something he did. It was who he was. Without it, he felt like a ghost in his own life. Depression came like a heavy cloak. Thomas distanced himself from friends, family, and everything he loved. He rejected calls from his former running club. He cancelled his subscription to Runner's World. He stored his medals and trophies in boxes in the attic. Except for Max. Max, whom Thomas had rescued from a shelter as a puppy 6 months before the accident, became his only point of contact with the world. When Thomas was in the hospital, his sister had cared for the young Labrador. When he returned home, confined to a wheelchair, Max adapted without complaint, never straying far from his side. Every day, the Labrador would bring his leash in his mouth, waiting for a walk that rarely happened. Max's hopeful eyes never judged, never demanded. He simply waited, patient and loyal, day after day, month after month. As Thomas sank deeper into depression, his physical therapy appointments became less frequent. The wheelchair became a permanent fixture. The house grew quiet, save for the clicking of Max's nails on the hardwood floors, until one day Max stopped eating. At first, Thomas thought it was a temporary issue. He tried different foods, even cooking chicken and rice, Max's favorite. But the Labrador merely sniffed at the bowl and walked away. After 3 days, Thomas finally called a cab to take them to the veterinarian. The first time he had left the house in weeks, except for his increasingly sporadic medical appointments. Dr. Melissa Chen had been Max's vet since he was a puppy. Her face grew serious as she examined him, ordering blood tests and scans that confirmed what she had suspected. "The examination leaves no doubt, Mr. Reed," she said quietly. "Max has an advanced tumor in his liver. It's already spreading to other organs. We can try treatments to make him comfortable, but honestly, we're talking about weeks, maybe 2 months if we're very lucky." The news hit Thomas like a second accident. But this time, something different happened inside him. As he wheeled himself and Max home in silence, the words echoed in his mind. Weeks, just weeks. For 2 years, Thomas had been existing, not living. Now, faced with losing his only remaining companion, he realized how much time he had wasted in self-pity and regret. That night, while watching Max sleep beside his bed, his breathing shallow but peaceful, Thomas made a decision. If his friend's time was running out, he would make these last days the best of his life. And that meant overcoming his own limitations. The next morning, Thomas dug out his old physical therapy exercises. With difficulty, he began practicing walking again without the support of the wheelchair. The pain was intense, but there was something stronger driving him now, the ticking clock of Max's remaining days. The first day, he managed to stand for just 5 minutes before collapsing back into the chair, sweating and shaking. Max watched him curiously, his tail thumping weakly against the floor. "Tomorrow, we'll do better, buddy," Thomas promised. Each day brought small progress. First, it was just a few steps in the backyard with the support of crutches. Then, short walks around the block with a cane, Max trotting beside him on his leash for the first time in nearly 2 years. The pain never subsided completely. Sometimes it was so bad that Thomas had to bite his lip to keep from crying out, but he pushed through it, one painful step after another. Neighbors watched in amazement as the man who barely left the house was now walking daily, always with Max by his side, as if they were both on a mission. Some offered encouragement, others looked on with pity, but Thomas ignored them all. His focus was singular, making Max's last days meaningful. 3 weeks into their new routine, while Thomas was checking his email for the first time in months, he discovered an announcement that made his heart skip. The Dream Run, a 5-kilometer charity event that would take place at the local beach in 3 weeks. It wasn't a marathon, but for someone who hadn't been able to walk without help for 2 years, it seemed like an impossible dream. The event welcomed participants of all abilities, including those with pets. Thomas stared at his computer screen for a long time, then looked at Max, who was dozing in a patch of sunlight. "What do you say, boy? One last run together?" As if understanding, Max lifted his head and gave a soft woof. That's all the confirmation Thomas needed. Thomas intensified his efforts. Morning and afternoon he practiced with Max. They started with short distances, gradually building up to 1 mile, then 2. The medication Dr. Chen had prescribed kept Max comfortable, though his energy wasn't the same as before. Thomas reconnected with his old physical therapist, explaining his goal. She was skeptical but supportive, providing exercises to strengthen his knee and advice on how to minimize further damage. "This is medically inadvisable," she warned, "but I understand why you're doing it." As the weeks passed, Max's health continued to decline. He slept more, ate less, and sometimes seemed disoriented. But somehow, during their training sessions, the old spark returned to his eyes. It was as if he understood the importance of what they were preparing for. The night before the race, Thomas sat on the porch with Max's head on his lap. The stars were bright above them, and the distant sound of waves breaking on the shore provided a peaceful backdrop. "We've come this far, buddy," Thomas whispered, gently stroking the Labrador's graying muzzle. "Just one more run, together, like old times." Max looked up at him with eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom in the world, then licked his hand once before settling back into sleep. When race day arrived, the beach was crowded with participants and spectators. Volunteers handed out numbered bibs, water bottles, and dog bandanas for the canine participants. Thomas registered them both, pinning number 437 to his shirt and tying a matching bandana around Max's neck. People looked curiously at the man with the limp and his aging Labrador. Some recognized the former champion and whispered among themselves. A few approached to shake his hand or offer encouragement. "Thomas Reed, didn't you win Boston a few years back?" one runner asked. Thomas nodded without elaborating. That felt like another lifetime now. At the starting signal, hundreds of participants surged forward. Thomas and Max began slowly, deliberately pacing themselves. Their planned strategy was to alternate walking and slow jogging, with breaks as needed. Their pace was much slower than the other participants, who quickly left them behind. The course followed the shoreline, with the ocean on one side and beachfront properties on the other. The sand was packed firm near the water's edge, making it easier to navigate than Thomas had feared. By the halfway mark, Thomas's knee was throbbing relentlessly. Each step sent jolts of pain up his leg. Sweat drenched his shirt despite the cool ocean breeze. But Max kept moving forward, sometimes looking back as if saying, "Come on, we can do this." Other runners passed them on their return journey, many offering words of encouragement. A few slowed down to ask if they needed help, but Thomas waved them on with a determined smile. "We're good," he'd say, "just taking our time." When they reached the 4-kilometer mark, Max began to slow down noticeably. His breathing became labored, and his steps grew unsteady. Thomas knelt beside him, ignoring the protest from his own body. "It's okay, buddy," he said softly, offering water from his bottle. "We've proven our point. We can stop now." But Max struggled to his feet and continued forward, his eyes fixed on the distant finish line that was now visible down the beach. And Thomas, with tears in his eyes, followed him. The finish line was almost empty when they finally approached. Most participants had already completed the race and collected their medals. The organizers were beginning to dismantle the structure, thinking everyone had finished. But then someone recognized Thomas. A volunteer pointed, and soon a small crowd began to form. Runners who had finished, spectators, race officials. They lined the approach to the finish line, understanding they were witnessing something special. With just 100 meters to go, Max suddenly faltered. His legs gave way beneath him, and he sank to the sand. Thomas immediately dropped to his knees beside him, fear gripping his heart. "Max, stay with me, boy," he pleaded. The Labrador looked up at him, his eyes clear but tired. Thomas could see the determination still there, the desire to complete what they had started. Without hesitation, Thomas scooped Max up in his arms, all 30 kilos of him, ignoring the searing pain in his knee. The crowd grew silent as they watched him struggle to his feet, cradling his beloved companion. Step by painful step, Thomas carried Max toward the finish line. When they crossed it together, the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Many were openly weeping. A race official approached with 2 medals, placing one around Thomas's neck and the other gently over Max's head as he lay in Thomas's arms. "This is what the dream run is all about," the official said. "Not speed or competition, but heart." That evening, Thomas created a comfortable spot for Max in the living room with his favorite blanket and toys. The Labrador was exhausted but seemed peaceful, almost satisfied. Thomas sat on the floor beside him, talking softly about their years together, about the races he had run, about how Max had saved him in ways he couldn't explain. "You never gave up on me," Thomas whispered, "even when I gave up on myself." Max's tail thumped weakly against the floor in response. That night, Max slept peacefully in his favorite spot next to Thomas's bed. For the first time in weeks, he seemed content, even happy. Thomas fell asleep with his hand resting gently on the dog's back, feeling the slow rise and fall of his breathing. When morning came, Thomas found Max had passed away in his sleep. His mission completed, his last run accomplished. While the grief was overwhelming, there was also a profound sense of gratitude and peace. Max had given him one final gift, the courage to live again. In the days that followed, Thomas received hundreds of messages from people who had witnessed their finish or heard about it through social media and local news. Their story had touched something deep in people's hearts. 6 months later, Thomas opened Max's Place, a rehabilitation center that paired rescue dogs with people recovering from physical trauma or depression. The center quickly became known for its innovative approach to therapy, combining physical rehabilitation with the healing power of the human-animal bond. Today, Thomas runs a foundation that helps pair rescue dogs with people recovering from trauma. And each year, he organizes the Max's Run event, where owners and their dogs celebrate the bond that changes everything. The event has grown to include participants from across the country, raising funds for animal shelters and rehabilitation programs. Thomas still runs with a slight limp, but he runs, and sometimes, on quiet mornings at the beach, he could swear he sees a chocolate Labrador running alongside him, leading the way as he always did, because some bonds are so strong that not even death can break them, and some races are never really finished.